G'day fans and welcome to another exciting Monday night for Sci-Fi Zone. It's all yay, it's all big exciting things happening in the science fiction world. And of course with me tonight I've got the lovely Claire. How are you doing? Oh, you've got a bit of a connection issue there. Are you there? Can you hear us? Are you there? Am I on? No? No? Oh, looks like she might have actually frozen up. Sorry, Claire, we might have actually lost you there. So I will get back to you. So, yes, if you can hear me, Claire, you may need to disconnect and reconnect just to make sure everything's working okay. And I'll just try one more time. Claire, you with us? No? Oh, at least you're frozen on a good shot. I mean, I've had freezes in the past where I've just gone like that and it just never looked pretty. So, yes, that's a bit unfortunate. But anyway, hopefully with a bit of luck, Claire will come back and we shall continue on. All right, so we've got a few things to chat about this evening, but before we get sort of started, we sort of need to cover off something that's a bit on the personal side, and it's a very, very sad state of affairs that occurred during this week. So one of the things that happened is that we had the passing of a very good friend of Graham, known as Garfield Barnard. Now, some people out there watching the show won't know who this guy is, but he's was effectively like the media personality, science fiction TV show and movie media personality who knew his stuff. People on the same par as people like myself and some of my friends Russell and Jeffro and a few others. But he lived in Sydney. And what Garfield's primary claim to fame is that he actually produced a show called, which you may see still on Channel 31, called The Schlocky Horror Picture Show, which he created himself. And so Garfield passed away this week, and one of his things that he created was this particular program that still airs on Channel 31 even now, and where he would show horror movies with the host, which he's got here is Nigel Honeybone. So if you ever see The Schlocky Horror Picture Show on Channel 31, that's actually his creation. He did that all by himself with the help of a friend. And that was actually, it's really, really good and really well done. So just showing his knowledge of media, science fiction media and TV information. The other thing that Garfield was famous for, he used to play Santa Claus at his local mall. He'd been doing it for years and years and years. And the person sitting on his lap there is a well-known science fiction fan from Sydney called Ian McLean. But Garfield apparently was a very, very good Santa. And with the big buffy beard that he had, you can imagine that he would have the Santa thing down pat. And that's one of his other big claims to fame. But from our perspective, when I say our, and Claire and myself's perspective, one of the greatest things he did for a fandom was being involved in conventions. And of the three conventions that we ran, Con 9 from Outer Space, Con 70 and Con 80, Garfield was actually an integral part of all three of those events. So he actually came down from Sydney and ran the film video program, which it was completely off his own bat. He would send me through a list of all the movies he would show. He would come down here and he would show those. And of course, he was also big into panels and discussions because the guy really knew his stuff. And I've got, as I said, friends of mine who know their sci-fi movie and TV information really well, but even they said Garfield sort of outstripped them. So, yeah, he was actually a big sort of person within the convention scene. And of course, panels. When he was on panels, I made a point of ensuring that he was on panels because he had a lot to present and a lot to discuss. And he was actually a really, really good personality to have around. And as you can see here from our first convention back in 2012 from Con 9 from Outer Space, he was an integral part of that, which was really, really good. So, and if you're interested, there is actually a video interview that he did. I'm not sure how long ago. It's on YouTube. It's called Pagey Train number 75. I think the host of the show is a bit of a tool, but it's good to see Garfield there to sort of talk about his history with the Schlocky Horror Picture Show, how he got about, how his involvement with fandom, and all of his achievements. So, is there anything that you wanted to say, Claire, now that you're back with us about Garfield?
Oh, he was just such a lovely guy, and can I say, gave really lovely hugs.
Sorry, what was that?
He gave really good hugs.
Yeah.
But
So
movies hugs are the best movies I have.
it was a very sad state because there's a lot of people within the fan community who are sort of like integral, significant parts, and we have long histories and have done a lot of things for the community. And even though we didn't see Garfield that much because he was based up in Sydney, when he did come down for the convention, it was like, mate, I've heard all about you. You're the greatest thing around. And it was actually because in 1998 I was at a room party at a convention in Sydney, and we caught up and we actually discussed what would be the genesis for Con 9 from Outer Space, because we actually said, wouldn't it be great to have a convention, an old-style convention dealing with 1950s science fiction movies and TV shows? He was a fan of it. I was a fan of it. Now, it didn't progress beyond that discussion, but years later, when it started to get the roots were starting to be formed between Russell and myself, and we sort of developed Con 9. I always said it was because of Garfield's discussion with me that planted that seed, and for that reason, it came into being, which was really, really cool. So
very cool.
There you go. So Andrew said the interview was 4 months ago. Okay, so that's very, very cool. And you are right, Colin. It was a very, very sad, for me personally, very, very sad situation. And yes, but the thing is, if Garfield was watching this show right now, he'd be saying, okay, enough of the doom and gloom. Like, get on to the happy stuff, because, he's a science fiction fan. We're sci-fi fans, and it's time for us to move on to something particularly interesting and get back into the guts of the show. So, Claire, this week, I know it's been a bit of a weird week. We're still in lockdown and all the rest of it. Have you seen or done anything that has grabbed your attention from a science fiction perspective?
I really haven't. I've just been completely in my little bubble. I mean, I've been, as usual, reading books and watching TV shows, but
there's nothing wrong with being in bubbles, I can say. What can I say? Very, very cool. All right, so for myself, there's actually two things that are very funny. There's actually one of our regular viewers is watching us right now. One of the things that I got stuck into this week, there's two things that I saw. One, aside from on the news, little kids wearing Star Wars shirts, and I saw that twice. One of the things I started watching this week, and you can thank William for this, is War of the Worlds on SBS. So on my other show, William has a tendency of nicking off at 9:30 at night to watch War of the Worlds on SBS, and I thought, I've got to find out what all this is about. So I didn't tune into SBS, I went to SBS On Demand and plowed through the first season in one night with my other half. And I've got to say, or ask, have you seen this at all or know anything about it?
I've seen the first season, yeah. I think it's amazing.
It is, isn't it? For those who don't know, it's actually it's a different take on the War of the Worlds that we've seen in the past. And you could argue it's kind of not War of the Worlds-ish to a large degree, because one side defeats the other side relatively quickly. It's more V-like, if you will. But I really like the idea of it. And for those who haven't seen it, it has a strong European connection. So instead of being in the US like these things usually are, there's aspects in London, Paris, and Belgium. And that worked for me. I really liked it. So what do you reckon? What pushed your buttons?
It's a really good cast of characters, and yeah, as you say, it's a different take on the story. Like it's kind of what happens to various groups of people, and I like as you say, the international flavor of it. I think makes a big difference. It makes it quite, for me anyway, makes it really interesting. I get a little bit bored of Americanisms and American stuff all the time, and I do tend to watch probably more British stuff than I do American anyway. But I really love the flavor of it. I really love the fact that it's looking at it from different points of view, not just different people, but from different places in different areas with different situations. So different, some are family, some are friends, some are on their own for a bit. There's the army sort of point of view in a way, and how they mix, how the different points of view sort of work together and affect each other and that kind of stuff. I really like it. I like a lot of the characters too.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's very interesting. I thought it almost had, like, if you're going to say, what does it remind you of? It reminded me of things like Fear the Walking Dead, but without the zombies, because there was plenty of dead bodies everywhere. And it was kind of funny because it is a European production. I was sitting there waiting for someone to say, I wonder what the Americans are doing. God damn it, where's America when you need it? There wasn't any of that at all. And I really quite liked it. And it's because there's a lot of it, for those who haven't seen it, there's a lot of the subtitles for the Parisian, if that's a word, and Belgium material. And that's really good. I really like that, rather than just being English the whole way through. So they're actually sticking with their original language. And it's definitely one of those scenarios that says, okay, what would you do in this situation? And for that reason, I mean, there's a little bit of predictability involved, but overall, I thought it was actually quite good. So I can thank William for that. So sucked me into it, which is kind of cool. But yeah, War of the Worlds, yet another iteration of the show. Yeah, as I said, it's a loose adaptation, not a direct adaptation. So if you're looking for big robots with 3 legs, you ain't going to get those. But other than that,
no. But the robots that you do get are pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. And if you're wondering what their 4th leg is, don't ask that question. All right, so there you go. So Thomas has been watching Orville. We know about Orville. That's been around for a few years. I think there's only the 2 seasons of that, isn't there? So they didn't go any further than that, which is a bit unfortunate. But what we did see, we really, really love. Now, this came out this week, and I thought, push some buttons, if you don't mind, umpire. And it was if I press the button, here we go. It is the Foundation trailer. So the trailer for Foundation, which is based on the books from Isaac Asimov, which he wrote 100 million years ago. And I've got to say, I'm not into trailers that much because they tend to be very formulaic. But given the option, I would happily watch this than watch Dune, because there's already been a Dune film. There was a Dune mini-series in the early 2000s, including its sequel, but there's never been a Foundation story. So what do you think? Did you see this at all?
I did, yeah. I'm very excited about this, and watching this trailer has made me even more excited. It's a long series of books, and it's a big story. So I'm really curious how they're going to tell it. And I have to say, this trailer has me interested. Like, it feels like they're heading down, I don't know if I should say the right path, but an interesting path, and one that I think could work really well. I think it's going to be worth watching. And the visuals that you see look pretty amazing as well.
Totally agree. Now, I heard something from David Goyer, who's writing the show, and they've acknowledged that they couldn't do it in a movie concept. There's nowhere in the world. The story, as you said, is way too big. So they're doing it as a series. So the first series is 10 episodes, and their aim is to try and get to 80 episodes. So that's obviously 8 seasons, if you will.
Right.
To tell the whole story. So they obviously haven't done that. They've only just done the first season and whatever else. The only thing that's irked me is that I was on Apple Plus, and I was like, friggin', I'm not subscribed to Apple Plus. It's like, I don't know if you are. So,
but you can't really complain about that, Jags. I mean, these are the people who are making it, so you've got to run with it. It is a lot harder now than it used to be.
If they could have put it on Binge or Netflix or whatever, but it's like, I mean, you do have to wonder in terms of who's subscribed to what. Do Apple Plus uses outright Netflix viewers or whatever? It's just a pain. I thought, oh, damn. So, but otherwise, yeah, like you, I'd be very, very keen to see what they do with it. So,
I mean, I switch between subscription services. There are so many out there now, and there are good things on all of them. So it's really, I find it completely impossible to just pick one and stick with it. So I flip between the two. I'll have Netflix for a couple of months, and then I'll stop that, and then I'll have Amazon Prime for a couple of months because there are good things on that. So Apple Plus has got 2 or 3 different things that I want to watch, and this is definitely going to be one of them. So I'll be signing up in time to watch it.
Very, very cool. Once again, you come down to that scenario. Do you watch 1 episode per week, or do you wait until they all come out and just plow through the whole lot? It's like with William, for example, you got me into War of the Worlds in the first place. I was rapt that I could just plow through the first season in one go. My other half and I watched it in one hit, including the first episode of season 2, because you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And this whole week by week thing, it just kind of doesn't work for me. But which is
War of the Worlds is on, because it's on SBS. I'm watching it week by week as it comes out this next season.
Yeah. Well, I need to know how many episodes they've shown so far, because I'll just wait until I can binge season 2. So there's only, do you know where that? I mean, William might know this, but do you know? How many
3 or 4 episodes have been on SBS so far, anyway.
Very, very cool. Good stuff. Where are we? So Ange is also looking forward to Foundation. I'd be very curious. I mean, I haven't read the books for 100 years, but good on them for doing it. And hopefully they can follow the story, as Claire mentioned, and really make something out of it. Ange just said Wheel of Time trailer. I didn't say that. Did you see that at all, Claire?
I haven't seen it, no. I know, I'm aware that it's out, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, very good. Like Anders mentioned, they're paying for 5 subscription services at the moment. In the old days, paying for one Foxtel service, people said, "Oh my God, that's a lot of money." Now they pay for 5, and it's almost, or 4 or 5, and it's almost like the same amount. So there you go.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 4 episodes. Oh yeah, very very cool. So I'll wait for another 4 weeks until all of them are out, and just go the binge, mate. You got to go the binge. It's very very cool. All right. Anything further you want to add before we move on to our topic for this evening?
No, that'll do it for me.
Very, very cool. All right, so what we're discussing tonight is about bloody time travel, mate. There's backwards and forwards and all this sort of stuff, and I know for a fact, and I can say this with quite a bit of certainty, that Claire is a bit of a time travel fan. What do you reckon, Claire? Does it work for you?
Oh, definitely. Well, most times, yeah.
Most times.
I mean, there are always
very, very cool.
There are always a few that just don't quite cut it, but I love the scope that's available through time travel.
Very, very good. Now I'm going to have a bit of a chatter about one. We're going to discuss probably time travel stuff that we love, movies, TV shows, whatever. But let's try and nut down and work out how it would work. Okay. And going to use 2 examples here. Now, while I'm doing this, I can't see the screen. So if Claire sees any really great comments, she's going to have to scream out and tell me. So hang on, I've just got to press this right button here. So what I'm going to show you is that we're going to be focusing on 2 movies for tonight, right? The Time Machine and Back to the Future. Now, there's a million other movies and TV shows you can work on, but we're going to stick with these for the time being. Okay, boom, cheers, time being. So let's look at it from the perspective of, if time travel was to work, how would it work? Okay, so in this case, we're just going to be going forwards in time. Forwards is the easy one, right? We're just going to jump ahead, no problems at all. And if you look at the time machine, the original time machine, for example, what happens is that the machine doesn't move. He moves the lever forward, and time just slowly progresses, which means that if you were standing in the room with him, the moment that George moves the knob, he just quietly vanishes, and he would actually be sitting in the machine looking at you, looking at the empty space. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Very cool. So there's a word for this where I think perpetual, I think it is. So depending on how fast he moves the device, he himself sees everything transition in front of him. So if he wanted to say, I want to move 100 years in the future, but I want to do it really slowly, he would sit in the thing for hours. And I think in the show, that kind of happens. He's sort of like he's trapped amongst all these volcanic rocks, and he has to wait for those rocks to break down after thousands of years. And I find that actually quite interesting because, like, okay, so it's not instantaneous. He hasn't just put in a date, press the knob, there he is. And I think there's a lot riding on how this would actually work in real life. So what do you think as a concept for time travel?
I don't know. I think, I mean, it's a good way of doing it, and it's a good way of showing it, showing the movement, showing how far you're going, showing how fast and slow you're going. But in terms of the mechanics of it, I don't know. I mean, if you want to stretch it far enough, it doesn't take into account the movement of the planet. So technically, if he's sitting still in one spot, the planet is going to move out from under him, and he'll probably never find it again. So I don't know. It's an interesting one, but it's definitely good in terms of movie production because you get to see the change. He has a lot of control over how far he moves and how fast that happens. If he pushes the lever, then it goes faster and faster, but he can slow it right down and pick his spot, like his re-entry moment, which a lot of other systems you can't kind of do that. You just end up where you end up. So it's an interesting one.
Very cool. Now, Aaron has joined us, and he says he makes a joke of making jokes. A Time Lord walked into a bar, and a barman said, "Why the long scarf?" Yeah, boom, tish. Very, very funny. All right, so we've got the time machine version, right? So let's look at the Back to the Future way of traveling in time. In their case, their machine is moving as opposed to standing still.
Yeah.
And when it disappears, it jumps ahead, but the jump is instantaneous. Okay, so from our perspective, the car is gone, and then 1 minute later, it reappears. And as Doc Brown says, from Einstein's perspective, time just jumped, right?
Yeah.
So the question you could ask yourself is, well, what happened in the intermediate time? So is it a case of you just disappear, like from from an observer's point of view, the car's gone, and like, where did it go? And then like a minute later, it just reappears. So from our perspective, nothing, it's changed, it's disappeared. But from the dog's perspective, it's all just happened. And I think it's a way of saying you're frozen in that moment to reappear at the destination time. I haven't explained that very well, but I know what I'm trying to say. What do you reckon?
No, I get what you're trying to say, but it's interesting because in fact it's almost the opposite. He's not frozen in that moment at all. He's completely skipped that moment. So yeah, that's a good question. But
the problem is that from inside the car, you've just had an instantaneous jump, but the real world is still continuing on accordingly. You're like, like in this case, 1 minute had passed, and our characters are still in the car park, and then the car reappears. And of course, the longer you jump, the longer the duration. So I would argue that it disappears, and in real time, it's disappeared off the plane of existence, only to reappear at its destination, if that makes sense. So unlike the time machine version where you say, I wish to travel 100 years in the future, I've got to sit there and watch time pass all around me, and then I'll reappear. In the Back to the Future version, you just suddenly, from your perspective, you've disappeared, but real life has continued on around you. And in both occasions, in both examples, it's at the same point that you left. So in the time machine, the machine is always in the one spot. So he doesn't move around anywhere. So it's not like, as you said, the planet is shifting and he's like crashing through the house and suddenly he's out in the street somewhere. And the Back to the Future car is the same thing. It reappears where it disappeared, if that makes sense. So, and I think in both occasions, I think that if the two of them could exist, or if there was an option between the two, I would argue that the time machine version is more true to life than the Back to the Future version.
It's more likely to be scientifically plausible. Yeah, I would say.
So you're going?
Oh, yeah. I know. Yeah, probably.
I love it. Probably. It's mind-bending stuff. This is the easy bit. We're going forwards in time, right? So there we go. Yeah, Anne said it's more like a skip. Yeah,
exactly.
So it all comes down to two perspectives, the person in the machine and the person outside of the machine. So using the time machine version, as I said earlier, when George hits the knob, if you're sitting there looking at him, suddenly he's out of phase and he's just disappeared. But he's sitting there watching you, pacing up and down and having your chocolate, whatever, until he stops. And then suddenly, bing, there he is, he's reappeared. And it's like, that would be very trippy. Whereas in the other version, you don't see that, right? So you've just jumped. And, of course, in the second film, he just jumps, 25 years or whatever it is. So, yeah, it's two completely different perspectives. And I'd like to think from the time machine version, you would, based on technology and the way the system works, you couldn't just arbitrarily say, well, I'm going to jump 1,000 years in the future. Bing, oh, there I am. It's like, well, that's all well and good. I think that you would actually have to sit and go through that entire 1,000 years. So
that's certainly the way it seems. But wouldn't an observer see them until? Wouldn't someone standing in the room keep seeing them until they?
I don't think so, because they're out of phase effectively. So it's. I mean, they may see an apparition. I don't know.
I actually, that's what I was thinking, that they would see something, that something was there, because he stayed in the same spot. So even he has to have been there the whole time for whoever's in the room watching, just not experiencing it at the same rate. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah,
it's a bit of a brain bender, isn't it? Which is good. This is what we're all about, brain bending. So where are we? There's a few comments here. It's like, as Aaron said, it's jumping. He said, not jumping. Groover written a record, you just skip the music. Remember, there are two perspectives, the person in the machine, the person outside of the machine. So there we go, Thomas. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Later on, we'll discuss about all the things that we really love about TV shows and movies, the ones that are really on the ball and the ones that just go, what the hell? So, but I thought I'd pick these two because they offer completely different ways of doing exactly the same thing. Okay, so, and that was the easy bit. We're going forward in time, right? So let's go get a little bit complicated here, and let's say where are we? We're going to go backwards in time. Now, this one I personally don't think is physically possible. If time travel could exist, you could only go forward. You can't go backwards. But let's assume, for the sake of the argument, you can. So in the time machine version, the machine is always in the same spot, right? And when he lands in the year 3000 or whatever it is, he's outside. Outside, his machine hasn't budged. Okay. Now, in the story, of course, the Morlocks grab his machine and drag it inside the building. Okay. So he's come back and the machine's gone walkies. And then inside the tunnel, he jumps back in it and goes back in time to where he came from. Okay, so for those who haven't seen The Time Machine, this is actually one of the really cool sequences of the entire movie. And when he returns back, he's got to do the same process. He's got to see everything go backwards that he saw when he was going forwards. Okay, so it's not an instantaneous jump. He's still got the same issue. He has to relive absolutely everything. In this case, very, very fast motion. And because the machine was moved, he now finds himself outside. Once I get to the thing, outside. Okay, so that just proves in this story that where the machine is dependent on where he's going to end up. All right. And whereas in the Back to the Future version, even though the machine is moving, this is going backwards in time, even though the machine is moving, when it goes back to the exact point that it left. And I think that's actually quite interesting to see how they sort of tackle that. What do you reckon?
I've never really thought about it in that way before. It's interesting.
Because I like the fact that in the car, even if he's going backwards or forwards, he always appears in exactly the same spot that he left. And that's part of the story, right? Whereas in the time machine, if you move the machine, obviously that moves too, which I think was actually kind of cool. And the fact that one is a stagnant device when the other one's a mobile device, you could almost argue, well, if you're in the car, you jumped ahead of time, who's to say the car isn't traveling in its quantum realm for how long is that? 100 years in this case, and then reappear somewhere else on the other side of the world. So, and it's such a big jump backwards. And you are right. If the planet has moved, right, and the car, he could just reappear in space.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that in theory, that's what would happen. But it depends. I guess it depends on what it's tied to. But it doesn't make sense for it to be tied to the planet if it's not experiencing time at the same rate as the planet. Yeah.
It's our job, Thomas, to hurt brains. That's what it's all about. See, I mean, it's pie in the sky, right? There's no, we're just making this up as we go along, right? Okay, so don't stress. There's no right, there's no wrong. I'm not going to look at Claire and go, Claire, you're completely wrong. What the hell's wrong with you, woman? So there you go. He's in the same position, but the Earth moves. Yeah, see, this is where it gets complicated. So if you said, I'm going to move forward or backward in time by 1,000 years, the Earth has clearly gone into a different part at that point, right? Even like Huffy, right? Instead of being here in the orbit, it's now somewhere else. Do you then suddenly rematerialize? This is really complicated stuff out in space. And in case in the George Wells version, where you see time move around you, you were thinking, shit, I'm now in space. I can't stop because as soon as I stop, I'm in vacuum. And that's going to end badly. What can I say?
I was actually going to say, I was just thinking the time machine version is more likely to be realistic in terms of the planet, because if it's there all the time, if it's maintaining that physical connection with the planet, then it makes more sense that it would move with the planet. But the car, on the other hand, which vanishes, and because it's moving, it doesn't have the same sort of physical connection. It would make more sense for that to reappear somewhere else, wherever the planet was.
Yeah.
Although, maybe it's getting dragged along in the gravity, even though it's moving at a different rate of time.
So for simplistic purposes, let's not worry about that side of things. I like this comment, right? This is an absolute ripper. So Thomas said his brain is hurting, and then he comes up with this. Theoretically, time can travel backwards because of the laws of moving forward. Whose brain's hurting now? Oh, my goodness. So let's not worry about the movement of the Earth, right? That's just complicating everything. So you remember you're standing on a planet that's evolving and revolving. Yeah, I know, exactly. It's all in the move. Let's just, unless you're a flat Earth person and the Earth doesn't move at all. So let's just take that out of the equation. Let's keep it simple. Now,
I think that's
an example. Sorry, go on.
I think that was a Monty Python reference.
Okay. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Now, an example of that of a show that does things completely differently is in the Terminator. In the Terminator, when you come back in time, you end up in different spots, so you're not actually relevant to the machine at all. So wherever your machine is that's sending you places, they're sending you in different bits, and it's like I got no idea how that one works. So, what do you reckon?
Do we know that? I mean, do we know that he's not right where the machine is in the future?
It's probably an estimated guess because both these characters arrive at the same time, and you would assume that I think the understanding is one's sent straight after the other. And of course they do this in Terminator 2 as well. So it's not just the first movie.
So if they were using the same machine, they would end up in the same spot. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is sort of an interesting concept. I mean, isn't it lucky when you can argue that who would build a time machine out of Griffith Observatory? Sitting out in the open. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So,
well, it's a clear space that you know is going to stay empty, so maybe it does make sense.
now you're complicating things. But I mean, clearly from a you don't want to, from a cinematic point of view or a narrative point of view, you don't want to have the good guy turning up. Kyle Reese turns up. And then, like 20 seconds later, Arnie turns up right behind him. Oh, you're in my spot, just shoots him at the end of the movie. Oh, goodness gracious! And the comment apparently was from The Meaning of Life, which is
Meaning of Life. Cool. There you go.
Now this one, I'm gonna just chuck this one in because I looked at this and I thought, you know what, it worked for the narrative, but I thought was in real life would never work. Right now, I'm gonna have to go back to my original thing. I have to click all these buttons to get what I'm going to. Now, this one doesn't work for me at all. Right? How Superman turned back time. If you have the Earth revolving in a different direction, right, that doesn't mean that everything just goes backwards. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but it's not that the Earth is moving the Earth moves in the opposite direction to demonstrate that time is changing. It's not the Earth's movement that causes time to change.
Yeah, but everything's going backwards, and it's like that doesn't. Just because the Earth is spinning in a different direction doesn't mean that everything just reverses.
But the Earth isn't spinning in a different direction. It's moving back in time.
He actually flies backwards.
He's moving back. It's from his point of view. He's moving back in time. So it looks like the Earth's spinning in the opposite direction. And that's why everything's coming back, because he's moving back in time. So it's not that the Earth is going backwards. It's that he is going backwards.
All right. I don't know, because this is showing me that the Earth was traveling clockwise, they went anti-clockwise, and now going back to clockwise again.
But it's showing it from his point of view.
Okay.
This is what he's seeing because he's moving backwards in time.
So what does everybody else think of that? Okay, so Ange agrees with you. All right, fair enough. Then so be it, Jedi. There you go. Here we go. Claire hit the nail on the head. Yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, and I think it's all complete tripe myself. But, and I like the fact that if he does turn it all back, then theoretically, what the disaster that occurred in the first place will still happen again. But let's not worry about that. It was a visual representation of what he was saying. It's like, oh, okay, we'll just show up the next.
I feel like maybe I'm right, Tags.
There you go. There was a scientific paper released this week. Superman got it wrong. Okay, so there you go. Maybe ads is on my side, which is, oh, here we go. Everybody's on your side. Oh, geez, Claire was just far out. Molly. Fine. Hang on. Whatever. All right. So there you go. Very good. Yes, score one for you. I didn't get it, but I'll believe every word you say because this is why you're on this show. Hang on. How much? This is from the vial. How much time went into this? How much time is left? Time's up. I know. There's no time to talk about time because we don't have the time. Very, very, very cool. I didn't get it, but hey, if it worked. And of course, now here's two things. I'm going to just chuck this one out there, right? So regarding back to the time machine, George, right? Now let's assume he wants to go 100 in the future, right? But he takes his time doing it. Because he's sitting in the machine looking around, having a whale of a time, yada, 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 does he age while he's doing it? So if he says, if it took him 2 days because he was just going slowly to reach wherever he wants to go to, does he suddenly get hungry, tired? Does he age in that time, even though he's actually beating time? What do you reckon?
I think he would. I think he would be aging at the rate that the time machine itself is aging.
Hang on, I'm going to cut you off. Very, very important. Dags was right. Yeah. We finally got one. I tend to agree. I think he would age and have the effects of being sitting there for a long period of time, hunger and all the rest of it and fatigue and whatever else. So realistically, if he says I want to go 1,000 years in the future, you'd have to think, okay, well, I only want to spend 20 minutes getting there rather than like a few days and just watching the world changing around me. And of course, I guess the same thing would apply going back in time as well. What do you reckon?
Either that or you pack a snack.
Well, the other thing to ask too is when he goes back in time.
And then you can take as long as you like.
Yeah, well, true. So when he goes from the year 3000 back to 1899, right, does he then de-age while he's sitting in the machine? So is he coming back younger than when he left?
No.
No, I
don't think so. Because the time machine's timeline is still moving forward and he's attached to that. So he's still moving forward in terms of his age, I think.
Yeah,
I don't know. I could be wrong.
Actually, I agree with you. I think that he's actually then disconnected. So conceivably, if he goes into the future, like he does in the movie, stays there for about a year, right? Then comes back to 1899. When he returns, he's actually 1 year older than when he left, even though he's just like returned at the same time. Even if he, I tend to agree with you on that one. Even if it only took him 20 minutes to get into the future and then 20 minutes to come back. So,
I agree.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I didn't want to talk about bathroom breaks, but you can take that into consideration. So, very, very cool. Only movie, fantastic visuals. Yeah. Well, I mean, scientific papers can say whatever they want, but no one's traveling in time as of right now. So, realistically, so don't have to stress over it. Somewhere in Time from Aaron is an interesting way of time travel. Well, in Somewhere in Time, he wills himself back into the past and the future. And as I said, there's a lot of different variations of how these things work. So, for example, in Time Cop, just quickly, in Time Cop, there's always that discussion of what happens when you meet yourself in the future, right? Yeah. And in that particular movie, I think it is Time Cop, when the prime version sees the past version, they can't occupy the same space, and there's a sequence where they sort of touch and they sort of melt, and it's all very, very messy. And as to why that would be the case is anybody's guess. But do you think that if you went into the future, met yourself, you could actually physically touch without having anything go wrong? I think it would be possible. What do you reckon?
I would think so.
Yeah. I mean, it worked for the narrative, but
Yeah. I mean, it's a good narrative point because it complicates the story. It makes everything harder if you've got to avoid yourself. But
hang on. But if you've jumped in time, how could you still be there? That doesn't make any sense because you've gone, and until you reappear, you won't meet yourself. Because you don't exist. You've jumped. It's not like there's a second version of you that just appears out of nowhere, and that just continues on. So that theory doesn't work, does it?
What, that you can meet yourself?
Yeah. Because you don't exist.
If I learn how to time travel in 6 months' time, and I travel back to this moment, I could walk in the door, and I would be here because I'm here.
Yeah, it works going backwards in time. Doesn't work going forwards in time because you yourself have actually jumped forward. Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but if you go forward and then you come back, then you'd actually be meeting yourself after you'd done it, not before.
I need to find that comment from Thomas where he says his brain hurt. Oh, my goodness. All right, hang on. Let's have a look here. Here we go. Ads is just coming out. Oh, wrong again. We are traveling through time right now. I know we are. Ads just there. I like that. We're wrong again. I love that one. So where does one touching on? I don't know. Actually, it was just in the movie Time Cop, and they sort of tried to explain it. So one dude meets the other dude, and they're both the same dude. And one's a good guy, one's a bad guy, but they're both the same person. So yeah, it's kind of funny. Constantly, technically not the same matter since the body. Yeah, that's a good point, Ange. I don't know. It just worked for the narrative. So it was. Here we go. William, look at this. The Blintovich limitation.
Is that a real thing?
I don't know. I think he's just pulled that one out of his fairy one. Christy said Rose showed it was a bad idea in Doctor. Well, yeah, it has definitely alternative connotations. And the other thing I want to bring up. Where was it? It was actually from Star Trek, actually. I've got to call this one up. This one I realized, hang on, it sounded like a good idea at the time, but actually it kind of wasn't. And this was from Star Trek 4, where Gillian jumps from the present of 1986 to 24, whatever it is, right? She jumps on Captain Kirk's lap, off she goes in the future, right? But there's no discussions anywhere as to what the connotations of that would be. I mean, she's obviously, at that point, she's a single lady and all the rest of it. But who's to say that next week she wasn't going to meet someone, they get married, have a child, and that person ends up becoming a world leader? So what do you reckon? And no one complained about that.
Well, partly because she made the choice. Like, she had that choice herself. But also, you've got to wonder what everyone who was left behind thought. I mean, she was a fairly important scientist and quite well known, and someone would have noticed she disappeared. So
the FBI of the 24th century would have it as an open case that one day Gillian was there, the next day she was gone, and no one ever found the body. No one knows what happened to her. And then she rolls up in the 24th century like it was nothing and goes, "Oh, yeah, that was me. All good.
That's a cold case.
Jesus, all good to go." And that, of course, Yeah, I know, it's just crazy. And that, of course, that introduces the whole thing of like who's watching after this now. Of course, in Loki, the TV series, they've got the Time Variance Authority, and Star Trek had the Department of Temporal Investigations. And it's an interesting one because if you travel in time now, we use the example of going backwards because we know if you go forwards, you yourself just disappear, and then whenever your destination is, you just reappear, right? But if you go backwards in time, does that impact everything? Like if you've jumped back 1,000 years, does the Earth then move from where it was back over here? Does all of society reset itself, or is it just you? That's the bit that makes no sense. How one person in one machine can affect everything. And what do you reckon about that?
Well, it's the butterfly effect, isn't it? You
Yes.
crush one butterfly in the wrong place at the wrong time, and everything changes. So it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a small thing that can make a huge difference. But it depends how far back in your timeline you go, and it also depends on how much interaction there is. I think, yeah, I think it can make a huge difference. And of course, there's that whole every time something changes, it splits off into an alternate universe, effectively. Yep. But then there's also the theory that every time you make a decision, it splits off because in one universe you make one decision, in another universe you make another one. So it gets complicated pretty quickly.
So here's a question for you, and this is for everybody else who's watching this. Do you believe in multiple timelines? Like as of right now, as we're doing this, is there another version of you and I doing a much better show than this this version here explaining this?
That's impossible, Dax. It's impossible to do a better show than the one we're doing right now.
Yeah. So what do you think, believe in alternative timelines?
I don't know. I mean, in a way, it makes total sense. And in a way, it doesn't matter because we're in this one, and at the moment, we have no way of getting into any of the other ones. I don't know. I don't know whether I believe it's possible or whether it's real or not. Not sure.
Yeah, very, very cool. So there's a couple of comments here. So yeah, Gillian calls the Kelvin timeline. Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, once again, moving forwards is easy. It's the backwards bit that is really, really difficult. I like that. Everything changes or nothing changes. Yeah, that's very philosophical, Ange.
Yeah.
Well done. Here we go. Something from Hitchhikers, the improbability drive. Yeah, well done. So there you go. Yeah. I like this one from Colin. Turn around. There's a 6-month-older version of you who's just walked in the door going, "You got it right away." Oh, dear.
Oh, no.
And yeah, what have we got against butterflies? It's
Nothing.
an interesting concept because the whole world hinges on the smallest changes. And you can surprise yourself when you sit and analyze, even in our own lifetime. You go, if this particular event didn't occur, we would have been on a completely different path. And using, like right now, using the COVID thing, for example, if there's an alternative version where the COVID crisis never occurred, right, all of our lives would be completely different, right? The whole world, effectively. And as someone, actually, my other half said to me, Lynn, she said, do you realize that 2 years of our lives have been wiped out, right? Because we haven't done anything in 2 years. And I thought, yeah, that's enough to sort of do your head in. And of course, a lot of people have passed away in that timeline. So
millions, literally.
Yeah. So if it had never occurred, we would have just continued on as normal and been none the wiser. But, that's another story.
Yeah.
So, yeah, ads. Well, what is it about? She left the whales that went extinct in the first place. Well, that's another saga with Star Trek 4. They take the whales into the future. They only got 2 of them. Doesn't mean they're going to repopulate the entire planet of whales. What if George and Gracie were on their last legs, as it were, and then they just carcass they've got no plankton to eat. They just carcass of old age the next day, and they're back to square one. Anyway, who knows? Yes. I agree with you, Phil. Yeah, you got to live in the here and now. But it's a good discussion to have, and it's just a bit of fun.
Right.
And we've got about 15. Maybe a better shirt. Exactly right. Very, very, very cool. All right. So I think personally, if somebody said, yes, we've invented a time device that can move through time, of the options that we've got, which, there's millions, not millions, there's lots from sci-fi movies and TV shows, I do think the time machine version would be the correct one. I can't imagine you just instantaneously, you walk in, you walk out, and suddenly I'm in a different, it's 100 years later. I find that a bit of a hard swallow. Going back in time, I personally think is not possible because it's just way too difficult. Everything has to change just for you to be able to do that. And, but, who knows? So, what do you reckon? Do you any final thoughts before we move on to something a bit more exciting?
Yeah, no, I mean, I tend to agree with you that, I don't know, I struggle with it because I kind of want it to be possible, but the biggest problem with going backwards in time is the effect that it would have, and that's the whole paradox of, or the grandfather paradox. if you kill your grandfather, then you don't exist. So how can you have gone back in time? All that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And when you do go back, there's like everything just changes, just where you were. I don't know, it's just too complicated. I did actually like in Back to the Future when even Doc Brown says he's looking forward to see what happened in 25 years later, which occurred a few years ago, right? Someone can tell me 2018 or whatever. And you think, look at it from his perspective and go, okay, so what exactly changed between 1985 and 2018? And a lot did, but a lot didn't. And not all of it was good, as we well know, and you can almost look at that one scene and look at it from his point of view. And we're not talking about the artificial version of 2018 or whatever it was. It's the real version of 2018. Okay, Doc, this is what you're going to face when you turn up. Something like the internet's going to be come into existence. Smartphones are going to come into existence. September 11 is going to happen. The war in Afghanistan is going to happen. A lot of things are going to be still exactly the same. A lot of things will have changed. And it's trippy. So our own time machine is actually us living through our lives. What do you reckon? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
2015. Thanks, Mr. Walt. So, no, of course it was. Yeah, they do everything in fives. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got 15 minutes left. So I think we've sort of brain bended ourselves through this. It's a bit of fun, but surely some people have sat there and thought about it, going, that ain't going to work. I was like, well, maybe it would work. And I was like, anyway. So yes, it's all well and good, because we always see it from the perspective of the person who's the main character, not from an outsider's perspective, which is kind of funny, because in the Time Machine, just finally, in one of the DVD documentaries they made, they actually had a little sequence that they refilmed or filmed with Rod Taylor and the original guy who played Philby, and when he comes back after being in the future for 30, 40 years, and they use the actors because the actors had aged obviously at this point, and to have like a little 10-minute sequence, and it's actually really, really quite clever. So, yes, very, very cool. All right, we've got as I said, just a little over 15 minutes to kill. So, time travel movies and TV show. What floats your boat, Claire? What makes you whistle? What's your faves?
I mean, Doctor Who. Someone mentioned Rose earlier. Obviously, Doctor Who is a massive one. He has a machine that moves in time and space, so he doesn't have to worry about the whole "where is the Earth" problem. But one of the things I really liked about the more recent series of Doctor Who is what they did with River Song, because we discover she is also traveling in time, but not at the same time or in the same rate or the same direction as the Doctor. And so every time they meet up, she's got a diary, and they spend 10 minutes figuring out where each of them is on the other person's timeline. I thought that was really clever. Like getting to the point of thinking so much is going to have happened, and they'll have been in different places and different times all over the place. They'll have met each other. She's kind of almost going backwards compared to him. So she knows his future, but he doesn't know hers. I think that was really clever, like a really clever way of looking at it and thinking about it.
So the moment you mentioned Doctor Who, and of course Doctor Who's obviously the big one, the big time traveling left, right, and centre. Good old Phil, who's the president of the Doctor Who Club Victoria, is like as happy as Larry because have TARDIS will travel, absolutely fantastic. So I like this one from Adsy. Yeah, there's always a sarcastic one in there. Oh, time travel doesn't exist. Someone go back and tell George not to sell to Disney. Yeah, good on you.
He might not listen though.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Angie's mentioned Time After Time, which is absolutely a fantastic movie set in the 70s, I think it was, late 70s, with George Wells and Jack the Ripper traveling in time from the 1800s to the current era. And, of course, Jack the Ripper's going in there killing people in the current era. It's very, very good. It's actually some really thought-provoking moments in it too, which is kind of cool. Chrissy said Outlander. I'm thinking of Outlander, which is a completely different movie. What's Outlander?
Outlander's a series, and it's based on a series of books where a woman, it's the stones, like the Stonehenge type stones. A woman accidentally goes back in time, and lives a life and falls in love and all that kind of stuff, and then gets back to her own time, and has to deal with fallout because she has grown older. She has actually lived a life. She's fallen in love. She's done all that kind of stuff, and then has to go back to her husband, who has been looking for her for, I can't remember how long it is, but it's a substantial period of time. She's been missing. I think it's years. I can't remember off the top of my head. And so she has to deal with the fallout of that gap. But also, she's still in love with the guy that she was in love with in the past. And yeah, it's actually really, like, there are rules about it. It's not just she accidentally falls through time. Something specific happens that allows that to happen. And she is able to recreate it as well, which I thought was really good. Like, it wasn't just a random wandering into the stones kind of thing. There was actually a logic. I mean, you know, more magic than engineering, but there is kind of a logic to it. It's a really good show, and it shows her completely out of time. Like, she's in Scotland and ends up in the Scottish Highlands, and is, I can't remember how far back, a couple 100 years, 300 years, something like that, out of her time. Yeah, so it's a good show. I'm waiting for the next season of that one.
Very cool. Christy said apparently is pregnant with the post-hubby's baby. So, yeah.
I was trying not to do too many spoilers.
Oh, mate, we're in the business here. If you haven't seen it already, what's wrong with you? So where are we? Michael said Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Yeah, a very, very cool one. Have we Predestination? No, not Predestination. There is, hang on. I'm thinking of Premonition or something where I'm thinking the wrong movie altogether. So
there are so many of them. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely no. Now, have you ever we've sort of touched this once before with I think it was Sci-Fi Zone, the original first series, about the whole you give a gift to somebody who then travels in time and then gives it back to the original person, and they go back in time, and the paradox of all that. You ever sort of had a bit of a think about how that would work?
Well, they do that in Star Trek, don't they, with the glasses?
Well, that's right with Kirk's glasses. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What McCoy gives them to him, and he buys them back later on. Because someone mentioned Somewhere in Time earlier, and that was an example where Christopher Reeve gets the watch from the old lady, goes back in time and gives it to the young lady, who then in the future gives it back to him. Where did the watch come from in the first place? So, what do you reckon?
Well, I mean, I guess that's one of those alternate universe things. It has to exist somewhere for it to exist at all.
Yeah, exactly right. So, according to Ange, Predestination was awesome. A Highland story. Oh, that's right up your alley then, Claire. How about that? How good's that? No? Doesn't ring any bells? No?
No, not off the top of my head.
No, exactly right. That is very, very cool. There's a lot. You are right. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say one of the other ones that I really liked was The Time Traveler's Wife. I remember the book. I remember the book better than the movie, but he couldn't control it. He just kept shifting and jumping in time and had no control over it, but only within his own lifetime. So he couldn't go to a time before he was born or after he died. And of course, his wife has to deal with how that pans out. He just disappears and then reappears, and and he keeps landing in different places and stuff like that too.
Yeah, because I think Quantum Leap was very similar, where he went back in time, but within his own lifetime, he couldn't go back 100,000 years or something like that. So, if I'm not mistaken, Colin has mentioned Philadelphia Experiment. Yeah, that was actually made 2 movies of that, and that was actually quite an interesting one. And going back to a time, I mean, Final Countdown, if you ever saw that, they're both military sort of stories, and they go back in time. And of course, Final Countdown was interesting because the opportunity of attacking the Japanese fleet on the way to Pearl Harbor, and of course, they don't get to do that. It's like, oh damn! And there's always someone left behind who then has to grow up, in the past, and then so when our heroes get back to the present, Fred, who was like 20, like yesterday, is now like 50 something today. Goodness. Yeah, stuff like that. That would be the trick. If you could go forward back in time, you take someone with you, kick him out deliberately, and then go forward and just see what's happened to him.
Aaron's mentioned Travelers. That was really interesting because they weren't physically moving in time. They were transplanting their minds into people who were living in a different time. So they were finding people who were about to die because they could tell that because they knew the past. And they were saving them and then transferring their minds into that person. So it wasn't physical time travel, but it was mental time travel, and then having to live as that person in a completely different time. And they were doing it to try and save their time, which was our future. That was a great series. I really loved Travelers. I thought that was really, really intelligently done and really interesting concepts all the way through.
Exactly right. I think Ads is trying to say Red Dwarf about going back in time. I think it's Red Def. I think he's missed the W there about getting JFK to shoot himself. Good one. Glenn has joined us from YouTube, which is absolutely fantastic. Time travel cool, but at what cost? Well, that's the question, isn't it? What are the repercussions? Because nobody knows. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And I liked, at least in Back to the Future, they'd go, jump ahead 1 minute and just see what happens. And, of course, for the dog, nothing happened. But for us, we had to sit and wait for the dog to reappear. But you just don't know. So it's tricky stuff. And yeah, that's why I thought going forwards is easy, but you just vanish and then you just reappear a little bit later. But the backwards thing, yeah, I don't know. That's got whiskers on it, I reckon. Colin's mentioned Voyages. Sorry, Colin. The only Voyager I know, as Claire will know, is Star Trek. So time tracks, there's the whole range of them. And the good thing is that there's no end of stories. Like, I think it was in Looper, I think it was, you get in the future and they said you piss off the wrong people and they just send you back in time to get killed and you get killed by yourself. How good's that?
Yeah, that was a really interesting, the way Looper worked was fascinating. It was really clever. And explored it more than a lot of them do. Like, a lot of them just kind of say, oh, well, you can't be in the same room as yourself or whatever. Yeah. But they took it a lot further. I really liked that. I mean, there was a lot of dodgy stuff all the way through, but it was a really interesting concept. Yeah, that was a good movie.
Absolutely love it. It's enough to do your head in sometimes. And you're right, some shows will just do it very simply. They get the machine, they come out the other end, you're done. Beautiful. How good's that? And other people sit there, let's try and analyze it a little bit more and see what the repercussions would be. But the good thing is it's a great story device and it works for absolutely everybody. Anders said Donnie Darko. I haven't seen Donnie Darko. I know of it. I haven't seen it. Have you seen it at all?
Look, I have, but a long time ago. I don't remember it well enough to comment.
So our thoughts are we have no thoughts. So sorry about that one, Ander. Remember a good Sliders. Yes. Yeah, that was another sliding in and out of time.
That's talking about that alternate universes kind of thing, where some little thing changes and it changes everything. Yeah, there was some really interesting. Different worlds, like all planet Earth, all humans in one way or another, but some little change way back in time had made a huge difference to the society. That was a really interesting one.
Very cool. You do wonder if you could travel back in time, would you come back and just watch ourselves redo these shows? That'd be kind of amusing, wouldn't it?
No. No offense, Jack, but no, I don't really want to watch myself do this all over again.
Yeah, that's true. Because in the end, actually, when you look at videos from way back when, that's a bit of time traveling when you think about it, because that was done at a certain point in time, and then what happened after that. So, it's very, very cool. Here we go. Good to be here. Looking forward to the show on time travel today. Absolutely love it. Look, everybody's got the good thing is everybody's got thoughts, everybody's got opinions, and you just take things at face value, and it's good for shits and giggles. What?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They build a restaurant at the moment in time when where the universe is about to be destroyed. And by the time you get there, as long as you put a bit of money in a bank account, compound interest means you can afford it. The way they play with time was absolutely amazing. It was hilarious and clever. I loved that. Yeah. Sorry.
Cool. No, don't apologise. That's absolutely fantastic. So there you go. Well, guess what? In our discussion about talking about time, we've actually run out of time. So how good is that, eh? So we've just filled in an hour just talking complete tripe.
Yep.
But if you get a chance, you've got to go out there and check out your favourite time travel movie or TV show, which is kind of funny because we discussed like Foundation earlier, and that isn't to do with time travel, but it's to do with time perception, what happens 1,000 years from now. And if you could jump ahead in the future, I'd be very curious to see how it all sort of turns out. And everybody thinks the future is, if you could jump 100 years from now, the world will be just fantastic. But, of course, we don't know that. So you have to wait until someone builds a machine and off they go. So what do you reckon? Imagine that. You actually build a machine, you jump in, you somehow vanish, and people go, what happened to Fred? And you go, well, Fred's time traveled into the future. And, of course, until if 100 years from now, you'll never know if you actually made it or not. So how good is that? Mate, enough to do your head in. All right, so any final words before we sign off for tonight, Miss Claire?
Yeah, my final words are: if you want to change something in the future, you just have to do stuff now to make it happen.
I like it. Very, very good. And what we're going to do right now is finish. So there you go. So we'll see you all next week. And of course, make sure you all stay in the zone. How good is that? Okay. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to us.